I'm moving on to the next stage of this evening, and that is to celebrate the achievements of a truly remarkable person and the winner of the Voltaire Human Rights Award for 2022, Brenda Appleton. People might have been horrified, as I was at the last election, when it became clear that trans people, particularly young trans people, were going to be the political footballs and used as a wedge during that election campaign. And ultimately, to our great credit as a nation, that politics wasn't ultimately successful in terms of the people that were spruiking those views, but they're corrosive and they're harmful, and we know the particular harm that particularly young and vulnerable trans people face. I couldn't think of a more powerful advocate than Brenda, having read her work, and I'm very pleased that Brenda will be introduced by Gemma Caffarella this evening. Gemma is a Vice President of Liberties Victoria. She's one of our spokespeople. She does amazing work together with Gregory Buckhorn. They've both really led the way in terms of our media work as spokespeople, and I spend most of my time learning from the way that they manage to get human rights and civil liberties into the public arena. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Gemma Caffarella to introduce the Voltaire Awards winner. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. In recent years, transgender rights have been under unprecedented attack. Trans and gender diverse people face a continued struggle to live their daily lives with dignity and harmony. It's noteworthy that this week we celebrated 5 years since the historic marriage equality victory that so many of us in this room played a part in bringing to fruition. Unfortunately, as part of that campaign, we too often saw the rights of trans and gender diverse people traded off for mainstream acceptance for LGBTIQ+ people. And in this year's election campaign, we saw the disgraceful use of trans and gender diverse children as punching bags and for political points. It's also important to say that this is an international phenomenon. In the UK, we have the author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling, now dedicating her time to attacking transgender rights to the point where she recently shut down an LGBTIQ suicide line that was aimed at protecting children by sticking her Twitter followers onto them. With that said, and keeping in mind that tonight is a night of celebration, there is more to trans and gender diverse people than just those sad stats and the sad stories. And in that context, Brenda Appleton OAM has tirelessly and unceasingly advocated for the rights of trans and gender diverse people in Australia for more than 2 decades. Brenda is first and foremost a policy wonk. She knows how to advocate to make change happen, and she has been the driving force behind a range of equal opportunities measures for trans and gender diverse communities. She has been involved in Transgender Victoria since 2002, being either chair or co-chair of that organisation for 17 of those 20 years. I mistakenly used the word retire when I referred to her stepping down from the role of chair, and she very quickly corrected me that she had only stood down from that role and was still involved. I'm not sure that Brenda will ever truly retire. She's played an instrumental part in Victoria passing laws to allow trans and gender diverse people to have their birth certificates reflect their correct gender. She was the co-chair of the Victorian Government's LGBTIQ Taskforce for 2 terms and was the first openly trans person in Australia to be named chair of a ministerial advisory committee. And she has been on the Senior Victorians Advisory Group and the Victorian Elder Abuse Roundtable, among, frankly, a million other things that she's been managing to fit into her time. Brenda has shown incredible bravery, tenacity and patience in pushing for the reforms that she's pushed for. When I had the great privilege of interviewing Brenda on the radio a couple of weeks ago, one of the things she uttered is that we have all become relatively impatient for change. And it strikes me as a really amazing thing that Brenda has been pushing for trans and gender diverse rights for a period of 2 decades now, despite several setbacks and often not winning. She has pushed on in order to win. Brenda is not the kind of person to claim victories as her own and isn't a person who would big note her role in some incredible achievements. It's our view at Liberty Victoria that we all have a big role to play in listening to, amplifying the work of and standing next to and with trans and gender diverse people to fight tirelessly for equal rights. And it's in that spirit that Liberty Victoria is proud to present the 2022 Voltaire Human Rights Award to Brenda Appleton OAM, and I invite Brenda to the stage.
Good evening, and thank you for the warm welcome and for this amazing event tonight. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I continue to learn more about the generational impact of colonisation on our First Nations people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I was surprised, but very pleasantly so, to be awarded the Voltaire Human Rights Award for 2022. Like many who willingly volunteer with different community groups, I was not motivated to win awards, but in an effort to improve the human rights for my community and help those coming behind. Awards are a lovely bonus. Thank you, Liberty Victoria. It's an honour and a privilege to be recognised in this very tangible way. Thank you. I'm an out and proud trans woman. My pronouns are she and her. I didn't choose to be trans. It was not a lifestyle choice. My life became a compromise to acting the role expected of someone assigned male at birth, no longer identifying as a man, or being true to my sense of gender and living as a woman. I chose to be authentic. My journey is unique to me, as it is for all trans and gender diverse people. The path I have followed means that I've outed myself each and every day for more than 20 years. I feel on view, judged, inspected, and scrutinised every day. Not tonight. This is tiring and ultimately exhausting. To deny my gender identity is to deny my existence. It is also why so many trans and gender diverse people who successfully affirm their gender, but in the process of getting on with their lives, and they do not publicly acknowledge their gender diversity. So they don't follow the very public course that I have chosen. It's understandable when we are still considered an easy target by many in society today. We felt judged 5 years ago through the marriage equality debate. We often felt sidelined and excluded when the debate was referred to as the same-sex debate. Gemma and Michael have referred to that. Being different and being just 2 to 3% of the population often means our voice does not seem to count or matter. I want to acknowledge that I stand on the shoulders of those who have advocated for my community over many, many years. I've been happy to play my part in continuing that advocacy. The last 10 years have been an empowering time to be a trans and gender diverse leader in Victoria, with a very supportive and caring government. And my special thanks to Martin Foley, the Minister for Equality, and Ro Allen in their time as Commissioner for LGBTIQ+ communities. I've been fortunate to work with a large number of amazing community people and allies. I also thank my colleagues and friends at Transgender Victoria. I've been able to step back from my roles there, knowing I leave TGV in very capable hands to continue the work started in the late 1990s by Sally Goldner and Kayleen White, with great support from Kenton Miller and Janet Jukes and many others. 25 years ago, we thought that transgender rights are about 20 to 30 years behind where we perceived rights for gay and lesbian people. And that was well before marriage equality, so gay and lesbian rights were a long way short of the rights enjoyed by the straight community. I deliberately use the term transgender rights because 25 years ago we really thought and spoke in binary terms. Much of society was in denial of the existence of transgender people, let alone the reality that many more now identify outside the male-female binary notion of gender. And I think the trans and gender diverse community's got a lot of work to do to enable the non-binary gender diverse side to catch up to where the transgender side is. In our world today, not only do we have 8 billion people, as of this last week, but we also have 8 billion different people, different in history and experiences, race, language, culture, physical and mental attributes, etc., let alone sex and gender. We know that nature itself is evolving and changeable. In a world that is made up of so much variety and difference, I struggle that so many people seem to think that when it comes to sex and gender, everything is black and white and fixed for a lifetime. They campaign that same-sex attraction is forbidden and a sin, and sex and gender are always aligned. It ain't necessarily so. We know from passed down stories that Indigenous groups around the world celebrated and revered gender diversity in bygone days. The LGBTIQA+ communities around the world have struggled over time, especially since colonisation, and some hard and fast, outdated interpretations of sex and gender. I'm horrified at the lack of LGBTIQA+ rights in so many other countries in the world, and often feel guilty to be discussing our ongoing list of areas of inequality and equity when so many others have so much less. We are truly fortunate to be living in Victoria. We learnt the powerful lesson through the marriage equality debate that we can achieve a lot more with the engagement and help of allies. I thank the allies here tonight and ask for your help and support for the ongoing struggle for trans and gender diverse human rights. I would think that we're still at least 10 years behind where gay and lesbian rights are at. The struggles for trans and gender diverse people continue on a wide scale today. Despite pulling back from many areas of advocacy, I'm particularly concerned about the mental health of my community. The denial of so many in our society of the existence of gender diversity creates a world where many feel rejected, excluded, humiliated, ostracised, marginalised, and discriminated against. Many struggle in a binary world from the day they go to school and girls go one way and boys another. What happens when you do not fit anywhere? School and education can be a real struggle which many never recover from. Family rejection is often at the heart of the issue. Is it any wonder that mental health is a huge issue? And we know from Australian research that about 80% of young trans and gender diverse people have self-harmed by age 25. And nearly 50% have attempted suicide by age 25. We also know from research that family support for a young trans and gender diverse person can lead to mental health outcomes like the general population. The very deliberate attempts by our ex-Prime Minister to politicise and belittle the lives and needs of trans and gender diverse people earlier this year was a very cheap shot. But it gave licence to many people to jump on the bandwagon. The resulting impact on mental health for trans and gender diverse was yet another disaster. The demand on counselling services rocketed as some politicians enjoyed their cheap shots. I was very saddened to read an article in The Age just this week, headlined, "The Deves Factor was meant to be a campaign masterstroke. It was a disaster." The article did not discuss or even acknowledge the disastrous impact on my community, just the political impact. I encourage people to be authentic and true to themselves. Take their real self to school or work. But when we have the Prime Minister attacking and encouraging others to attack us for being trans and gender diverse, you can imagine what it does. It drives people back into the closet. It explodes their own uncertainty on what it means to be authentic in a binary world where even their own family is more likely than not to reject them. In my case, I knew as a young person I was different, but being born in 1950 without the awareness that many have at a young age today, I just knew the feelings and uncertainty I had were wrong and needed to be hidden. Efforts at cross-dressing were few and far between because of the threat of getting caught. My father was an ex-army, rugby player, boxer, and I was unable to discuss my gender confusion. I thought I was the only person like me in the world, and just weird. Maybe queer until that term was demonised a bit later. I went to uni, got married, qualified, had children, and 35 years working in the corporate world in New Zealand, Australia, England, and across Asia. I was often in a lonely, isolated place. All that time, I harboured that inner doubt, but was able to repress it by working hard and acting the best way I could to meet society's expectations of a male person. In my 40s, I had increasingly difficulty hiding my real self and had more than 4 years of counselling to help me accept my own reality of being a trans person and my internalised transphobia. It was hard, and I cried nearly every session, many of which were weekly. I knew that if I came out as trans, I would jeopardise my marriage, my connection to my children, mum and sister, friends and family, my job. 25 years ago, the standard outcome for a married trans woman was separation from family, loss of job and home, often relocating to a new location and restarting from scratch alone. As I struggled to accept my own being trans, 3 suicide incidents provided me with the reality of risking life as I knew it or ending the pain I was in. I'm so pleased I was brave enough to become the out and proud trans woman I am today. I've never doubted it was the right decision for me. I'm delighted to acknowledge my life partner, Janice, who stood by me through those difficult years. And earlier this year, we celebrated, somewhat quietly, 50 years of marriage. I was fortunate as I was privileged, well paid, and could afford the help that I badly needed. I was fortunate to have a supportive partner and family. I was fortunate to have a supportive employer. I was fortunate to find support and my tribe in TGV in Melbourne. I'm now fortunate to be a member of a fantastic co-housing group that has recently moved into our own new home of 29 households and lots of shared facilities in Brunswick. We're trying to demonstrate village life in the inner city. Many in my community will struggle horribly in this world, in Victoria, in Melbourne. Can I ask for your help to change our world to one that does not just accept difference, but celebrates it? We often hear people express their acceptance of trans and gender diverse people. For me, acceptance implies there is something wrong, something to be accepted and tolerated, and it is often reluctant acceptance. We don't want to be tolerated or for reluctant acceptance. We want unconditional acceptance, leading to celebration. Surely our aim in life must be to support everyone to be the very best they can be and remove barriers and not create bigger ones. One in which everyone, including trans and gender diverse, is safe to be their authentic self and get a fair go. A world in which education, housing, access to health, especially mental health, aged care services and access to sport is a right and not a privilege. A world which is free of bigotry and discrimination, and we achieve true equality and equity for all. I was sad to reflect on a recent media release from Equality Australia, dated the 28th of October, which announced a big win for our community. The Albanese government had introduced a bill amending the Fair Work Act, ensuring that it protects trans, gender diverse and intersex workers from discrimination. It's 2022 and a bill to address discrimination for a sector of our community is a win. But we currently see legalised discrimination for LGBTIQ+, including trans and gender diverse people, in many faith-based organisations and sectors, including schools and aged care, still today. Our male-female prisons are a very unsafe space for most trans and gender diverse people. Difficult when there's a binary interpretation of life. Surely it is not asking too much to expect equality and equity. We have made some progress, but there is a lot further to go. We know from Canadian research that found those young trans and gender diverse people getting family support reported just 4% suicide attempts versus 57% for those not getting family support. Family support is more likely if society is more accepting of gender diversity. If we can have a world in which gender diversity is celebrated, mental health will be dramatically improved, and most of the other areas of need for my community will be addressed. The trans and gender diverse community would appreciate your help in the drive for societal change and celebration of gender diversity. Again, my thanks to Liberty Victoria for the lovely honour you've bestowed on me and my community. And my thanks for all the lovely support in the room and in the future. Thank you.